The council is allowed to take people off the housing register in certain circumstances, and they're also allowed to reduce their priority to bid on a property in certain circumstances. But likewise, there are other situations where it's not allowed. Since June 2012, councils have had quite a lot of freedom, a lot more freedom than they have before, to design their own allocation policies, and this includes cutting whole classes of people off the housing register. So lots of people might have found recently that the number of points they have to bid for a council house has changed, or that they're not allowed at all when they were before. The council is allowed to take you off the register, and the kind of situations in which they might reasonably do this is if they have a policy which says, for example, if you've done an antisocial behaviour related offence, or you haven't paid your rent in the past or something like that, then maybe you're not allowed to bid for another property. However, they must only ban people from the register in accordance with their own policy, so they can't just arbitrarily decide that they don't like you and therefore you're not allowed to bid. The second thing is that their policy itself must be lawful, and there are quite a few situations in which these policies are not lawful, especially because they're all quite new and we're just testing out what may or may not be lawful. So it's quite well established that a policy has to comply with the Equality Act, and so can't discriminate against people, and councils will be aware of that. So you're unlikely to find a policy which says, women are not allowed to bid for a council house or something like that. But that doesn't mean that all policies will comply, and there may be some requirements on the allocation scheme which are unlawful and which do discriminate, although possibly not intentionally. So, for example, there may be situations where they say, oh, you have to have lived in this specific area for a very long time, 10 years, and there's been case law which says, well, people who are fleeing domestic violence, if there has been there's no exception made for them, and those people are often women, then perhaps they're being discriminated against. Which leads on to another thing, which is that blanket policies are often unlawful. So the council can say nobody who has any rent arrears is allowed to bid for a house. But what happens if you've been in rent arrears the entire time because you're paid by housing benefit, and housing benefit is paid 4 weeks in arrears? It's manifestly unfair that those people would not be allowed to access social housing. And the council also has by law to give priority to specific classes of people. Those classes include homeless people who a duty has been accepted to, or people in temporary accommodation, people whose current property is overcrowded or unsuitable, unsanitary, members of the armed forces. So any suggestion that a whole class of people like that should be either excluded or awarded less priority than somebody else would be unlawful. And again, you might have a situation there where that sort of happens subtly. So you might be saying, going back to this residence requirement of 10 years, you have to have lived in the borough for 10 years in order to be housed, and that if they didn't make an exception for members of the armed forces who'd been situated overseas, then that would be unlawful, because that wouldn't be giving those people priority, even if it said somewhere else in the policy that former members of the armed forces do get priority. So it's not a matter of just reading it and seeing how is it written down, it's how it actually affects each individual person, which is what has to be looked at. And that's not to say that somebody who has to have priority, like a homeless person, can't be banned from the register at all. If you're homeless and therefore in one of the priority classes, but you've been convicted of some antisocial behaviour related offences, say, then absolutely you can be banned from the register and banned from bidding. What they can't do is design the scheme in a way which means that every single person, or a large number of people in those classes, are excluded from getting social housing. So, in short, if you think that you have been unfairly or unlawfully banned from bidding for social housing, or that the number of points or priority you have has gone down a lot, then contact Anthony Gold and we'll see whether we might be able to assist.